everyone. Welcome to another Tech Talk with Johnny Sanders, Truth in Life. Today, we're going to talk about securing your cloud, but we're going to talk about it from the perspective of Agile data encryption and providing methods to basically secure your cloud. So sit back, relax. Let's just dive into it and start talking about cloud encryption. So, what is cloud data encryption? So data cloud encryption is basically a process that transforms or encoding data before it's moved to the cloud storage. So you have your database storage in the cloud, uh, where you may not be familiar with, but there's relational databases in the cloud specifically for AWS. Um, that you will be able to store your data. So typically, cloud services like relational databases in or Dynamo database in AWS is one of the services. And basically, this will provide a range from encrypting connection, uh, encryption to sensitive data, a lot of data that comes across your network, your pipeline. So this will provide specific encryption keys to basically keep your data safe, and you will have a decrypted key that you will be able to use as needed. So, for instance, if you use Office 365 for emailing your information, so that can have an encryption key. This is built with an encryption key in the services, so the messages, both inside and outside your platform, is protected. Okay. So encryption services like these prevent unauthorized users from freely having access to your system, your network, your emails. Okay. It's a protected way, protected platform, um, where certain file data that you want to keep away from any other eyes will have a decryption key, and only you will be able to access this email with this decryption key, making it an effective data security method. I highly recommend it. I use it myself. I use it especially for emailing taxes, pertinent data information, financials, when sending across the internet. I try my best to make sure that the data is safe and secure, and that's one of the methods that I use. So data encryption is highly critical and crucial for cloud security, when you not only using it for your personal but for large projects, um, enterprise projects that I've worked on. And it basically helps to protect and provide more of a secure way of keeping your data and your sensitive information capsulated in a way that no one else can basically get to that data. And again, you will have access keys that will be given to you depending on your position. And then sometimes, if the security with a company may store it and have security measures in place where it happens for you automatically. In most companies that I know of, all that I've worked at, definitely have security, additional security measures to make sure that the data is safe, the data is protected, and even if you don't use certain access keys to protect data, sending data, receiving data, they have certain security measures that the company engineers basically have put in place. So, um, what I try to do is provide information that will help you with your current knowledge or help you think about doing it in an agile formality. Okay. So to help you with the data methods of encryption, um, I wanted to give you a few methods, a few examples of what you can do as far as key agile data encryptions. Okay. I would say number one, end-to-end encryption, which is E2EE, is it's encryption data at the source, and it keeps encrypted data while it's in transit or it's at rest. So it's protected either way. And the benefit of this is it only allows authorized people who has permission to decrypt this data. So pretty much it's you. So uh, in the company format, maybe a high level of security may have a master key, if you will, to get necessary data. But other than that, that's what E2EE is for. Number two, I would say is a attribute based encryption. This basically is an encryption that helps you with specific attributes, policies, fact findings, artifacts, sensitive data, private data that you want to keep secure as possible. And it may have a single key that helps you to keep guarded and keep it from having anybody else to have access to it unless you give certain controls to that particular individual or that particular group. Okay. Uh, Another one is, I would say, homomorphic encryption. Homomorphic encryption allows computers to be performed and encrypted without having um, to necessarily have additional decryption keys necessary for it. So they use this to enhance data that's private, secured, especially for multi-tenant cloud environments. So just pay attention to that. And again, as you grow or expand with your business, with your company, that may be something that you look into that will to help you. Okay. Quantum, number four, I would say quantum resistant encryption. Quantum resistant encryption basically uses cryptographic algorithms that are resistant to quantum computing attacks. Okay, so basically, it helps you with future protection, future uh, guidance, secured measures that um, it looks out for any future potential threats for um, that particular company, that particular department, that particular user. Okay. Token method basically replaces sensitive data with non sensitive tokens that can be used within the cloud environment. And it helps to reduce the risk of data exposure, and it meets the requirements for compliance. So if your company is getting audited, your department is getting audited for security measures, this is one of the things having a token in place will help you pass and go through audit inspection without any issues. Now, let's say um, we would talk about implementing agile data encryptions. Okay. This would be first thing I would say is adopt a layered security approach. You know, it's a benefit to have multiple layers where you get certain checkpoints, security checkpoints where uh, you have encryption security layers that basically will stop data from going to the next stop point. It would rest, just like if you were driving down the highway and you wanted to stop to catch a break, or it does that. It allows you to rest your data. Um, Whatever the data you have that's going to a certain spot, location, venue, database, warehouse, you have those particular checkpoints in place to help you. So, the best practice to do this helps you with combining more security measures, basically, like firewalls, intrusion detection in your system, access controls. All of these are different methods that will help you protect your data in securing moving multiple projects in an agile state. Okay. Number two, I would say regularly update encryption protocols. You want to stay current. You want to stay up to date. You want to monitor your protocols, your policies, your procedures, your standard operating procedures, SOP, um, and basically just keep up with the know of what is happening in today's time with technology, with artificial intelligence. You want to just be mindful to be able to protect your data in a high state, right? Number three, I would say leverage the cloud provider encryption services. So there's several services that you can use to integrate specific solutions. You want to be able to utilize built-in encryption services that has been provided to you by the cloud vendor like AWS. That they have a IAM um, that helps with identity access management that will help you give you more secure measures. And I was pausing thinking about a project that I was working on where I had to use IAM that provided multiple keys that need to be in place, because when you're in AWS, you set on the back end, there's certain settings and policies where you give access to certain people, you give access to certain departments, and it's a service that's already built into AWS. You just have to utilize it. Okay, that's one of their services. You want to be able to educate and train your staff members once you're able to get these protocols in place and these agile methods in place for security, because it's going to affect them if they don't know how to log in. If they try to send a file to a certain client or customer or department and run into a roadblock, and it's like, why is this not sending? Well, they may need a certain password, a certain key to allow them to go to the next level without any issues. And that may come with needed training. You want to make sure that they are aware um, of these new IT systems and protocols that you've put in place that's going to help to protect the data and make their job hopefully easier. And you want to be able to do regular training on a regular basis, uh, do lunch and learns, coffee break, video coffee breaks, um, to basically help with the training and explanation across the board. And of course, the more you're able to send out little nuggets and data via email, just letting the the departments know, the team members know these new agile methodologies for encryption and encrypting the data, and that this is to help to secure the data going into the cloud. Okay, so you want to be able to show when you're sending the emails. Sometimes it helps for them to utilize it, to welcome it when you're doing the training, is to let them know the benefits of that. um, you want to be able to, number one, tell them that it's going to enhance the security and protect the sensitive data from any breaches that may happen, or any breaches that some hackers may try to do. um, you want to make sure that you're letting them also know that hey, this is going to help us when there's an audit situation. We're in compliance. We're in compliance with risk and governance within the body of the company. So it's basically going to help keep our data protected from any issues, and we can get a seal of approval because we have these protocols in place, right? And of course, it helps us with data integrity. The more our data comes across clean, meaning not tampered with, meaning it's accurate, it remains in the state that we intended it to go. It hasn't been altered at all. So this provides integrity. This provides trust. This builds trust from a user perspective, from a department perspective, from executive management, stakeholders perspective. And guess what? When the word gets out to the media, it builds more trust with the customers and the clients across the board when you're doing business. Bottom line. So, agile data encryption methods are essential for securing cloud environments, protecting sensitive information from potential threats, potential hackers, potential people from just want to contaminate your data, because there's people out there that's what they get a kick out of, unfortunately. By adopting these comprehensive encryption strategies, your organization can definitely change and feel more secured when it's speaking about their data, when they're speaking to clients. They can have a posture of, you know what, we are very confident in our security protocols, our security measures, that this information, their information, is secured, is tight knit, and they can trust in what we have built, governance, quantum resistance encryption, tokenization, as I've mentioned before. So all of these add additional layers with our security. So another example that I would like to share on a project that I've worked on is something called Apache Kafka. Okay, Apache Kafka is a highly scalable messaging system that I've used on multiple projects to help with critical data that goes across the pipeline. Okay, so I'm gonna try to break it down without going into too much detail. Okay, so you have your non-Java clients that will basically send data into something called Kafka REST. Remember, I mentioned before, data comes in, it gets to a certain spot, data storage, S3 bucket, but a Kafka place where Kafka data can rest. It would go there and sit until the next security protocol has been sent. And we use APIs quite a bit. In this particular project, I use Hadoop. And basically, Hadoop would basically push the job to the main Kafka. And then I had a Kafka producer and a Kafka consumer. They both would send data to Kafka to be checked, secured, and made sure that it's in the cluster the way that we designed it to be, right? So from there, the Kafka data would be monitored. It would have a cluster auditor, and it would also have an audit UI, user interface. So basically, all this data would be checked going in and out of Kafka to make sure that everything would be secured. Now, the user interface part of it is what you, when you're typing in on the computer, that's what you would see. You submit, just like I mentioned before in another project, using API, you would send data, it would hit the URL, It would go to the location where that code has permission. It would go and scoop up that data like a waiter, deliver it, and then the user would get the information. It happens quickly on the back end, but for users, it would happen so they would be able to not have any interruption, if you will. So that's one project. Um, Another project that I worked with where it was a processing using AWS, and it would use SQS that would send data to an EC2 Amazon instance where worker nodes would basically send the data to the Dynamo database. Okay. That Dynamo database would send data to a SCADA and send it to a client application or customer application where Elastic Map Reduce would basically grab the data, do some configuration, and then send that data to the S3 bucket so it would be able to go to the client. So before it gets to the client, it would go through Redshift, and the client then would receive that particular data safe and sound. Again, it's a process um, using AWS. Okay, it helps with having these systems in place for protecting that data. Okay, so next, what we want to talk about is once the data goes into a specific database, we want to talk about it going into the disaster recovery. All right, because that disaster recovery is where our data center houses a large amount of our data. It gets stored there. Sometimes we store data there for months. We even have a process in place where data gets stored there for years. Okay? So, continuously talking about disaster recovery and preparing for disaster recovery, and the reason why we had to do disaster recovery planning and discussion because of the multiple applications that we were changing, deliverables were changing, and we needed to basically put our applications in a safe place, our data in a safe place. So, uh, before I share so much about the disaster recovery methodology and plans for deployment that we did with Apache Kafka, one of the things that I like to try to do in my efforts with businesses and departments is meet with them and let them know that what our plans are going to be from a IT engineering department plan that's basically also being transparent and letting them know we want to secure our information, secure our data. And when I set up a meeting with a couple of the applications and departments, because I would do a run through and I like to do one-on-ones. And one of my pushbacks was a department that was using old technology and they wanted to go to a new technology. And the pushback was the current company was using an older APM system, okay, if you will. This APM system was a little antiquated, it was a little dated, and the company was wanting to use something more updated, more secured. The name of the particular program is called App Dynamics. Okay. So, one of the things that I was having pushback on, the APM system was simple, it was easy, it was 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that's what they were used to and didn't want to change. But we needed to change. The application was purchased. App Dynamics was being utilized across the enterprise platform, not just for that department. So again, more explanation had to be done. So I basically called a meeting, had face to face with the the business management, and I say face to face, Zoom, Teams meeting, video conference, and basically heard both of their sides, got their points, and got their requirements to see how can I I help with providing uh, comfort, security for both sides, for both departments, for both stakeholders at hand. Because again, we're talking large sums of money here as well. So, doing a comparison diagram of what the system, this is what I did now, of what the system currently does with their APM system versus what the system is going to do with App Dynamics. And of course, App Dynamics is more structured, is more complex as far as what its capabilities can be and utilize in multifacets. So, of course, with people that have been doing things the same way for a long time, they get comfortable, and sometimes they don't want to move. And seeing something new that moves faster or quicker or outside the norm can be a little intimidating, a little fearful from their side of it. So I had to help break down some of those fear factors, those walls, and basically share with them, show them how App Dynamics would be utilized and how they would still be able to capture certain documents the same way in App Dynamics versus their APM system. Of course, I, IPs wouldn't have IP addresses would have to be changed. Um, um, on App Dynamics side, I had to install an enterprise manager workstation agents and upgrade their specific financial bookshelf so it can all work together. Now, with App Dynamics, it used more of Java agents, .NET agents, EPA agents, based on the business requirements. So I was still using the software protocols and the business requirements, but basically fixing and putting it in a place where it can be utilized on the App Dynamic side. And so I use basically Elastic Beanstalk to deploy and scale up web applications because now we're going to the cloud because the APAM system that they were using was on premises. It, it was on a server that was going to be obsolete. And um, once we were able to get them on App Dynamics, I basically configured their dashboard to what they were similarly familiar with. So they could monitor and do analytics uh, using this dashboard um, to help them get comfortable in moving further into the 21st century, if you will. And that helped. So, my point for saying all this, before I did disaster recovery, uh, moving forward in the plan was identifying which applications, which departments was going to be affected, and put it including them. And I want to share this particular example because that's part of what needed to be done for the project. Now, let's get into disaster recovery for multi-facet data centers and basically how I use Apache Kafka for deployment. So, disaster recovery project that I worked on, it was for a multi-data center approach, and it basically used Apache Kafka deployment. And Again, I'll share a little bit of what the project consisted of. And in this tech talk, it's those that are you that are familiar with um, the Agile Apache Kafka or data centers in virtual private cloud or public cloud. This will make sense for you. And again, this is a guide to help you to be able to just prepare you or do further research to know some of the key points of where to go and where not to go so you don't waste so much time. So this data center project that I worked on was to help reduce downtime and data loss. So in the result of big business, big data, it basically was the project was basically put in place because of so much vast amount of data that would be coming across. A lot of what we were trying to protect also is a large amount of revenue that was going to be coming through, and we didn't want that information to be halted. We didn't want operations to be halted. We didn't want, of course, data to be breached and people get our data and information. So what we put together, myself, my executive managers, my executive directors, and maybe one or two key stakeholders of what would be the best disaster recovery plan. What do we have currently in place? And then also, how can we protect the current situation and make it better? So it required multi data centers because of so much data. We talking terabytes, petabytes of data that was going to be coming across and stored. And one of the things that we utilized and thought would be good since we were using um, Apache Kafka was to use Apache Kafka um, in our deployment plan, where data centers that we were planning to put together would have a geographical location that could be put in multiple places across the United States for dispersed information quickly, easy, and we had to put together, different parameters in place. So one of the project parameters was for Kafka for data center number one, data center number two. You always want to have an availability fail failover safety. Okay, so you may have a producer consumer coming into data center one where Kafka can be used and Zookeeper was utilized. And we had a schema registry that was also set up. So a replication of the data would be in data center one that would be able to send the exact data to replication in data center two. And they would have the same parameters. So data center one would have a Zookeeper, data center two would have a Zookeeper. It would have Kafka to be able to send, store, process that data, and they both would have a schema registry. Okay, so it was designed to have multi-facet data center solution. It was designed to build a run book of data so you wouldn't have an issue with failover if something failed, if something stopped. And of course, you want to be able to test this periodically. Um, Test it every month, maybe depending on the sensitivity of the data, maybe every quarter, depending on the sensitivity of the data and the amount. And again, if it's data that you plan on keeping long term, that of course it is all of it is sensitive, but it's put away storage for 7 to 10 years that you're just keeping for safety. You may want to do that every 6 months, okay? And just do a testing. You may have to do a recovery time objective, an RTO, where the point in time after the disaster failover completes. So if something happens, your system goes down, the RTO will recognize that it went down at this time. Now, what goes hand in hand with an RTO is RPO, which is the recovery point objective. This shows the last point and place of good data before a disaster happened. Okay. And it will make sure that that application is running um, in its correct and current capacity as designed without any issues. And I've done that on multiple projects to make sure that in your recovery time, um, Redis, which is a real time uh, monitoring, measuring data for you, where I've had to monitor and check the metrics and make sure that if there was a failover, what, when, how did it fail over? Where is the data? What does it look like? Um, is the data damaged? How much did we lose? How much can we get back? Um, Sometimes it happens, right? Sometimes you have to go back and re-enter or resend certain data information. And in this process, you have to be mindful, be aware of your capacity, your network capacity. So I want to talk a little bit about VPC, which is virtual private cloud. And basically, you want to set this up so it can automatically check, configure, send your data within the ranges, within the timelines, across different subnets and network protocols that you have set up in place. You can configure this on your own, or you can work with other outside engineers with AWS. They work with you very well, and I keep bringing up AWS because that's what I've worked on, and that's what is comfortable for me to even talk to you about. Okay, so basically, using VPC network will help you expand your CIDR ranges without downtime. It will help you with keeping your data isolated. VPCs offer logical, isolated sections within a public cloud. Okay. It ensures that your resources, your data, are isolated from other tenants in the cloud, from other tenants, other departments, other people, other engineers, any other type of sniffing uh, protocols within the technology. It keeps it protected and provide a more enhanced security control. Okay. I would say number two would be to custom network configuration. Basically, VPCs allow you to customize your network configuration, including IP addresses, the IP address ranges, and subnets, route tables, network gateways. These all help you with flexibility, uh, design construction of your network layout, and you have it laid out according to the specs that you have required, or say that you want, or say that you really need it. So VPCs are divided into subnets, which can provide private or public cloud usage, features, and safety protocols. Basically, these segments of the network enhance the security controls, and gives you a solid flow. Okay. Now, access control list (ACL) is another security protocol that basically gives permission to different associates within the system resources objectives. So again, you have to have permission, and the ACL basically specifies which user has access to specific systems, processes, and then will grant them access accordingly to their permission range, state, number, codes, right? As well as what operations are allowed on specific objectives. Now, what does this look like? VPC, and I want to give you a couple of examples to help you. Um, with VPC, you will have your internet gateway, your virtual private gateway, and they will go into a router. And the router will basically grab the data, then disperse it to a router table, if you will. And from there, the network ACL, you will have a subnet one, you will have a subnet two. For instance, you may have a three or four. It all depends on your network and how large your expansion is going to be. You will have a security group where majority of your information, your keys, your access keys, will go into these security groups on in each of your subnets. So in subnet one, for instance, subnet two, subnet three, subnet four, and so on, you will have specific security groups in that where instances are set up. Now, again, we're talking AWS. AWS uses instances, and you basically spin up. And when I say spin up, engineers know what that means. Basically, you produce instances to be able to grab and send data, grab and send data. Now, with this, you you will have an opportunity to have and work with IPv4. That's the normal typical one. IPv6 is more complex with your data, and I won't get into all of that too much because it is um, more specific detail. But I've worked with both of them. But on a typical scale, IPv4 is what you use, and that has your IP addresses sending your data. You have access to be able to reach different computers, databases, structure with your access. Okay. Now I mentioned AWS and um, using Route 53. Basically, Route 53 sends data. Now, this is another example, if you will, using Route 53 with a data center and data recovery data centers, right? Disaster recovery data centers. Um, and so basically, I had as an architect, set up a region, okay? Within the region, it shows where the user basically is just working. The user doesn't know, it really doesn't care all the stuff that happens behind the scenes. But it's beneficial for engineers, architects, IT managers to understand how the data is functioning and flowing. So when something does break, halt, issue comes up, they have an understanding of basically having a blueprint of how their systems, data recovery flows. And using Route 53, data basically would send a request. The request would come into Route 53. And in this particular case with AWS that I had set up, it used we're going to use availability zones one, two, three, and four, just like in the other one with VPCs setting up subnets. Okay, one, two, three, and four. Very similar concepts. But in availability zones, one, we use the load balancer. And in that, we set up an EBS volume system and a web server. Data would come in, get processed, and that data would then go to um, a production one, a production two, three, or four instance. Now, here is where the IP addresses are similar. Once it goes from similar to VPC, the subnet is similar that the instance function pushes and data to the IP addresses, and you have to have those IP addresses correct, or your data will not flow. Or if you try to access it, if you have the wrong IP address, you will not be able to get access to this. And that those are security protocols. And the security groups that I mentioned in VPC is in place in this particular section and area. Once you're able to get permission and cleared, then you will be able to get access to the S3 bucket, or the data will go to the S3 bucket and be stored where it will get processed by a request. The S3 bucket is just that. It's where data is stored, gets processed, and will go to a Windows refresher app. This has another IP address where it would get processed. Now, the same thing, the same components that you have in availability zone one, a load balancer, EBS volume, web server instances, S3 buckets, Windows refresher app, you have to set those same components in availability zone 2, availability zone 3, availability zone 4 with different IP addresses. Okay, so it can be communicated. Now, how do we get this data to communicate? We use an IM optimizer where you use a DNS server to basically send this data and using STP protocols. Is security terminal protocols that basically sends the data across the internet, just like you would send data using an API, using STP, sending secured data, and it would go across the data centers, um, depending on, again, availability zone that you want to reach. Because we had availability zones here in the United States, uh, London, availability zones in Germany, availability zones in Poland. So the reach is, it depends on how large scale your company is and how large scale it's going. Um, is when you would need multiple data centers. So if one goes down, the whole company doesn't go down. One goes down, we have failovers to give us alerts to say something is wrong, something has happened, availability zone 3 went down, find out what has happened, get some folks on it. Let's make sure 1 and 2 and 4 are still operating without any issues. If so, make sure that we haven't been breached. Make sure, um, it. Hopefully, it was just a mechanical error, a data error, um, a blip in the system, if you will, something that maybe somebody changed the protocol script, or something happened in the background with the programming. Usually, that's what has happened, and it's accidental. Uh, Team members are always trying to update and upgrade systems, and sometimes in just not understanding or knowing that if you turn one thing off, it also turns all these other appliances, applications, data centers, databases, it turns all of them off. So um, having a good understanding of your network is key and important for engineers. And if you don't know, it's okay wherever you are. Take the time to learn what systems are doing, what connectivities, what dependencies are there with different applications. I worked in a company on a project, and we're looking at the data, we're looking at the connectivities, we're looking at the process flow for what we knew. It was a clean pipeline. Data was coming in, it was going through, it would be going out, checkpoint, good. So they wanted to get rid of this. Okay. Before we got rid of it, I'm like, wait. Let me do some research and do some digging. And I'm so glad there was something on the inside of me that said, do some further checking. And when I did that, there were three other applications that were dependent on this one particular application that looked very streamlined, nothing else it was doing, but it was streamlining, and three other applications was basically piping in and grabbing data and using this information for their department to produce certain reports, to produce certain finances, um, and deliverables for different departments. And it wasn't documented. And it wasn't documented, I believe, not intentionally. I believe it was not documented because the person or the persons didn't know. They didn't know. They didn't have a clear understanding. And for whatever reason, they just didn't know. Okay. Um, so what I did was finding out, doing my research, did some digging, documented everything, created some new architectural designs to show the process flow, to show how it comes in, how it goes out. And if they wanted this to be removed, that particular, all three of those particular databases, applications, departments needed to find a new um, location to connect with. How are we going to basically make sure that they keep the same data flow and function for their departments? And that was a different project that had to be spent up and managed and put in place going forward. And in one of the instance, they all had to basically upgrade to the new format, the new platform, the new system. And yeah, you plan and you have a budget for the year for in case certain financial matters come up and you need to spend. Um, you have resources for that. Some projects are planned ahead of time, and some projects, because of the situation, has to have a project put in place or spun up pretty quickly. And you go and say, okay, how much is in our budget? How much do we have to spend? What platform can we use? Can we use the same platform that this department is using or that department is using? I heard good things about this particular application. And in doing so, that department basically found out that they can upgrade their system and maybe do something a little bit less expensive than they planned on spending, or what the other department was going to spend, because they were going to need more power, more storage, more speed, more memory all to get their department to flow better with more security protocols in place, which is great. And you want to be thinking along those lines. You want to be able to think on how will my data be protected, number one, going forward. Will I be able to work with the same security group, same security team? And if so, I need to make sure that they're in line, they're on the same page. We can all meet and agree on this particular new software, new platform, and then they will know what they will need to do from their security protocol measures. And and again, working with the vendors, you will be able to identify that. You will be able to find out what you need, who will be doing what is necessary to secure the data, and you definitely want to have them a part of this new project. Okay, me on the hand, I I try to keep all the key players abreast to what we need to do. I want to keep the business that is going to be affected. I want to keep them in play. I want to keep them aware of what we're going to do. Engineers, architects, database engineers. Um, if it's going to, definitely want to keep your management, your stakeholders aware of what is needed or going to be done. Accounting, financials, budget. What is it going to cost? The plan of the cost, the expectation of when the expense is going to take place. Um, so it can be ready and prepared and accounted for. Risk department, governance as well. You just want to make sure that you have enough key members aware, because things always come up that you didn't plan for, you didn't foresee. Even though I have a ton of knowledge and experience with the way technology keeps growing and moving, um, I try my best to keep up with technology. And sometimes there are things that come up that I didn't foresee or didn't know. And you want to give yourself a grace period, a buffer, so you can identify when you run into this issue, this bottleneck, and try to resolve it as quickly as possible or come up with a solution as quickly as possible. If it's going to be something that's too complex for the project, it may be a part that you just leave out for now and put it in the parking lot and just wait until you can do better due diligence and secure the application. Number one, that's what we're talking about, being able to secure this data as best possible and keeping it moving in an agile methodology. Okay. So this last project that I want to talk about, again, using um, Route 53 with AWS. This is with an SAP application. Uh, this is finances where the web clients, the web clients were our accounting department. Okay, they basically would send requests and to AWS, Amazon. Route 53 would basically get the data, send the data to Elastic Load Balancer, and it would be auto scaled and spent up with multiple instances and again security groups. The data would basically be configured, checked, made sure that it is good, clean data. There's no issues. There's nothing troublesome that it can detect. So it would basically send certain data to the relational database to be stored, to be configured, to be utilized. It would send data to the S3 bucket to where it would be stored and configured and be then sent to um, a streaming server, and then Amazon Cloud Front to be watched and monitored. And the streaming database would be able to send whatever that crest, without that quest or request. I'm sorry, whatever I said quest. I'm being too short with it. Whatever that request was by the accounting team, they may be sending certain data. They may be sending certain information. They may be sending financials. Depending on what that accounting team was sending, it may be going to a specific bank. It may be going to the marketing team. It may be going to uh, television department. I'm just making stuff up now, but again, I want to make sure that I'm protecting a client's, proprietary information. So depending on what that request is necessarily done, it would go through this particular process to make sure the data is protected, it's secured, and it's safe. It's safe financially, financial records. I talked with someone just this week. We were talking about um, millions of records that was being sent across the pipeline, and how tedious this was, because this was a very large company, in their data that would come across in petabytes, and it would take at least a day or two for all of the data to be transmitted, transferred, secure checked, and in a bucket in a hub where that particular company could then go and grab the data, and from their security measures send this data on to be recovered, processed, um, being able to just uh, manage and monitor financial configuration of how much money they've basically received, and where they've grown from yesterday, where they've grown from last week, last month, last quarter, and it would be measured in a way so decisions could be made moving forward. And what was interesting is we were talking about this subject matter, and I didn't know we was going to be talking about this, and I just thought it was interesting that I got prepped even before this video. So I want to say thank you for joining Truth in Life. This has been another Tech Talk. It's been great sharing this information with you. Again, hit the like, subscribe, share the video, share the content. And you know what? I look to see you next time. So let's be good. Let's dare to be great. See you next time.